Welcome back, everyone, to CNN special coverage of the terror attacks in Boston. I'm Don Lemon.
I'm John Vause. We'd like to bring you up to date with what we know so far. The FBI now leads the investigation into Monday's bombing at the Boston Marathon. An 8-year-old boy is among 3 people killed when one blast was followed just seconds later by another. That death toll could rise as more than 140 people are wounded, many of them critically. A doctor at Massachusetts General Hospital says many victims were hit in the legs with shrapnel from the blast, and several amputations have been performed. President Barack Obama says those responsible will feel the full weight of justice.
John, I want to read some of this. I want you to hear, and I also want our viewers to hear. This is from the Boston Globe. It's a writer named Kevin Cullen from the Boston Globe. He writes about the 8-year-old boy that you just mentioned who was killed. He also writes about other people he witnessed and that he heard about was there. That is Kevin Cullen's page on the Metro section of the Boston Globe. The first one I want to read about, this is Newtown families. And you just go with us here, viewers. Is that the location and timing of the bombs was sinister beyond belief, done purposely to maximize death and destruction. This is among those who watched in horror as a fireball belched out across the sidewalk on Boylston were the parents of the school kids murdered in Newtown, Connecticut. The Atlantic reported they were sitting in a VIP section at the finish line across the street from the explosion. Then he goes on to write about the 8-year-old boy and about the rescue workers who showed up. He said, this is how bad it is. I went out Monday night and bumped into some firefighters I know. They said one of the dead was an 8-year-old boy from Dorchester who had gone out to hug his dad after he crossed the finish line. The dad walked on. The boy went back to the sidewalk to join his mom and his little sister. And then the bomb went off. The boy was killed. His sister's leg was blown off. His mother was badly injured. That's just one family, one story. One more personal account here. He goes on to write, I saw Lisa Hughes from WBZ TV trying to do her job amid the blood and the body parts. And then I remembered that Lisa, who is as nice a person as you'll ever find in this business, married a guy from Wellesley named Mike Casey, who lost his wife, Nellie, on one of the planes out of Boston that crashed into the Twin Towers. And then I tried not to cry and just marveled at how professional Lisa was. Just 3 accounts that he writes about in a very moving article in the Boston Globe by Kevin Cullen. So you see what the folks there are dealing with tonight.
Very powerful stories. Yeah. A sad day. Now, the blast shattered glass and sent barricades flying. It was even powerful enough to knock people off their feet. 78-year-old Bill Ifrig had the finish line in sight when the first bomb exploded. And he spoke to Piers Morgan a little earlier and described what he felt and what he saw. Piers also spoke to a Boston Globe photographer who, right in front of the runners, and saw his assignment change in an instant.
I saw so many injuries that I've never seen before. I saw people with their legs blown off, their foots blown off. I just couldn't believe the carnage. When I got to the other side of the fence, there was a barricade fence there to keep spectators off the course. There was just people on top of people on top of people, and it was just an incredible, sad sight to see that. And I just fear that the death toll will be greater than the 3 it is now.
John, I'm just going to leave you there for a moment. We've now got on the line Bill Ifrig, who is that gentleman that we saw being blown off his feet there, the man in the orange, and that image right now on the cameras there with the police. Bill Ifrig, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
The whole world has seen the images of you being blown off your feet. Tell me exactly what you experienced as you ran towards the finishing line.
Well, I was just approaching the last straightaway to the finish line, and I'd had a good day, and I was feeling really good. And I got down within about 15 feet of the finishing apron, and this tremendous explosion sounded like a bomb went off right next to me, and shock waves just hit my whole body, and my legs just started jittering around. I knew I was going down, and so I ended up down on the blacktop, and I didn't feel any severe pain, but as I rolled over, I seen a little scratch on my leg, but nothing too bad, so I laid there just momentarily. One of the finisher assistants come over and talked to me and asked me if there's anything to do, and offered to give me a hand, help me get up, and help me get over to the finish line so I could complete my race. So we did that, and I felt okay, so I told him I was probably all right. He insisted on getting a wheelchair over there. So we started to do that, but then before they had one rounded up, I said, hey, my hotel's about 6 blocks away, so I think I can make it okay. So they let me get out of there, and I went on home to my wife.
With just a small scratch on his leg. Hours after the attack, President Obama addressed the nation. Mr. Obama vowed to get to the bottom of the attack and ordered federal resources to investigate. Chief White House correspondent Jessica Yellen has the story.
Don, John, expect President Obama to be briefed throughout the day today on developments in the investigation. No doubt we'll see his schedule start to move to accommodate meetings on the Boston attack, and he'll have to start thinking about going to Boston to pay his respects. So far, the FBI is leading the federal effort with support from the Department of Homeland Security. Attorney General Holder called the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney to make sure the full resources of the Justice Department are made available to investigate this unfolding crisis. When the president spoke in the briefing room, he said he doesn't have the answers we all want. Who did this? Why? But he vowed investigators will find the guilty and they will face justice. He did not call this a terror attack. Shortly after his statement, I spoke with a White House official who did. That official told me that this was clearly an act of terror, but a thorough investigation will have to determine whether it was planned and carried out by a terrorist group. So the White House is clearly being careful with words here out of an abundance of caution, trying to avoid a rush to judgment. Jessica Yellen, CNN, the White House.
All right, Jessica, thank you very much. As the investigation proceeds, the timing of the explosions have stumped many people. Most of the runners had already passed the finish line. CNN's Tom Foreman tells us what police will be looking for to answer those questions.
One of the mysteries of these attacks is that they happened so late in this sporting event. More than 17,500 runners had already completed the 26.2 miles, had passed the finish line and gone on their way. Only about 6,000 remained. The elite world-class runners who attract so many spectators had long passed and left, and that's when these explosions happened. So what are police looking for? They're trying to find any way to see a connection between the people who were along this course before the explosions and the time they happened. They're asking for video, they're asking for anything that people took in the way of photographs along here to see if there's some connection. Do they see some person who appears in a series of pictures or videos who seems to be connected to those explosive points? If they can find that, that's a lead. That's something they can follow. And then maybe they can solve some of the mysteries of these attacks.
And our thanks to Tom Foreman for that report. And witnesses say there was a very heavy security presence during the Boston Marathon.
Well, so those behind the attacks found a crack big enough to cause some very serious damage.
And joining us now from London to talk about the security nightmare at such big events like these is Will Geddes. He's the managing director at International Corporate Protection, a threat management company in London. Will, my first question for you, this was a soft target, so was an attack like this just simply a matter of time?
I think it's something that we've always been concerned about. I mean, there haven't been many international or major sporting events that have been targeted in the past, and certainly I think Atlanta and the Olympics was really probably the most prominent in terms of a successful terrorist or a malicious attack, if you like. But securing something like a marathon is incredibly difficult. You've got a 26-mile course, and to try and protect it all the way along that route is virtually impossible.
What does it tell you about choosing this particular venue, the time of day, where the bombs were placed? Does this tell you anything about whether it was homegrown or whether it's foreign terrorism?
Again, I think one of the main component parts, which has yet to be obviously revealed, will be the composition or the signature, if you like, of the devices that were actually used on this occasion. I mean, if we go through that list of criteria, as you just mentioned, i.e. where exactly did the bombs detonate, what time did they detonate, certainly they have hallmarks of a terrorist attack. And certainly when we look at the fact that it was much after the veteran runners, or if you like, the elite runners, had actually subsequently passed, and you're looking at the capacity, and having run marathons myself, that sort of 3.5 to 5 hour period is probably when you have a good capacity of runners coming through. You're looking at the finish point, where there's going to be the largest amount of media that is present, and as we know, terrorists are very savvy and they want media exposure for their attacks. And so, there are lots of things,
Sorry to interrupt, but no warnings, no intelligence. Is it fair to say that clearly the authorities were caught flat-footed for this?
Well, again, it's very, very difficult until we find out more information. Again, we don't know whether this was a particular formed group or whether it was a lone actor. Again, Oslo is a very good case in point with Anders Breivik. This was a lone actor who'd planned this for many, many years, and yet set up a very, very sophisticated multi-location attack, which immediately led the authorities to believe it was a much more sophisticated and larger group behind it. So, again, it's too early to tell whether it's international or domestic.
You know, Will, it's been interesting to watch experts on a number of different networks. I'm flipping around tonight. I've been watching everyone's coverage, and people have been saying it's almost virtually impossible to combat something like this, especially with an open event like a marathon. Is that so?
Yeah, I think pretty much so. It is very, very difficult. I mean, when one puts this in comparison to, say, a sporting venue like a football stadium or an Olympic stadium, you've got a perimeter that you can set up around a fixed location. When you have something like a marathon, you've got a very, very long route. And bearing in mind that the Boston Marathon was also on a Monday, this is a normal working day, and also Patriots' Day, which is a Massachusetts holiday, as we know. So you have a lot of people converging into Boston, so very, very difficult. And the criminals and the terrorists will look for the easiest possible targets, and a marathon is a good choice on their part.
Well, I just want to follow up on that question, because what if in the beginning, probably the biggest group of people at the beginning of the race and then at the finish of the race, and I've heard one expert say, well, maybe the beginning of the race will be enclosed, the end of the race will be enclosed, or races in the future, and that may protect against this particular kind of attack.
Well, I don't think it would necessarily protect. I think what it will do is it would mitigate or minimize the chances of impact of an attack. Certainly, that expert was correct in saying that the start point is a very vulnerable position, because that's when you're going to have the largest convergence of people enclosed within a particular area. And likewise, at the finish point, where people are obviously finishing, where you've got a vast majority of spectators waiting for their loved ones to cross the line. However, it's those points in between that one has to be concerned about.
And Will, you mentioned the Atlanta Olympics, the bombings here in Atlanta in 1996 is a fairly good comparison to what happened in Boston. If history is a guide, then it seems that there will be some time before they make an arrest, because it was 7 years after the bombing before Eric Robert Rudolph was caught. So will we be waiting some time before there's an arrest?
Yeah, I think there will be. I mean, the first thing that the federal agencies will be dealing with probably right now will be all the weird and wonderful people out there who are going to be calling in, taking claim and responsibility for this attack. And they've got a very, very difficult task initially to sift through all those various claims and provenance, whether any of them could be actually accurate. But if there is an organized group that is behind or motivated behind these particular bombings, they will probably not shy away from coming forward and giving some evidence as to why it was them and proving that it was them. If it is a lone actor, again, this could take a considerable amount of time to find out who they were.
All right, Will Geddes, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your expertise.
And we will have much more on the terror attack in Boston in just a few moments. And when we come back, we'll also check in, see how the markets are doing in Asia. That's after a short break.